now our next guest is Bruce Mattare, running for County Commissioner, District 2. That is against Chris Filius, which Commissioner Filius was invited, right, Terry, at the previous time, but he declined actually his wife declined the invitation.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. There's a lot of other things you could be doing this time of the evening, relaxing with your family, kicking back, watching your favorite show, but you came out here, so thank you very much. My name is Bruce Mattare, and I am running for County Commissioner. The seat is for District 2, but everyone in the county will see my name on the ballot. So don't get confused about the districts when it comes to County Commissioner position. I'm running against Chris Filius, who's been in office for 5 years. I'd like to tell you why I'm running, but first, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I relocated here in 2013 with my wife Carla and our 2 small boys. And we came from a once great conservative state. Some of you have heard of it, Virginia. Now I know some of you thought it was going to be California, but it's not. It's Virginia. And believe it or not, Virginia used to be a really conservative state. And I could see the direction that it was going. And for those of you who were paying attention, a couple years ago, their governor he wanted to confiscate AR-15s from people. And thankfully, the sheriffs in some of those counties said, if I have to, I will deputize every citizen in the county to prevent that from happening. And that's how important the sheriff's position is in every county in this country. So I'm a business owner. I started my business in 2006. I took the first order on the desk that I studied on in high school, and within about 4 years, I was able to grow the business to just under 200 staff and full-time equivalents. Everything in the business was built from scratch. I wrote the contracts, I wrote the employee manual, I built everything. All the policies, all the procedures. We were a 24/7 operation. We were one of the largest DRTV and radio advertisers in the country. We even built the software from scratch. There was no software that you could buy to manage the way that the algorithm was set up to manage our customers. So I have a lot of experience working in a lot of different aspects of organizations. We were here in 2019, and the sheriff's race was heating up. And I wanted to participate because, like I said, the sheriff's position is an extremely important position. I'm a huge Second Amendment fan, and coming from the East, guns are not looked at the same way as they are in Idaho. But don't kid yourself. What happened in Virginia can happen here. And it's very important that good people step up. And so I did my research on the different candidates, and I concluded that Bob Morris was the right person to be the next sheriff. And so I reached out to him and volunteered to meet with him once a week. And after a few weeks, he asked me, would you be my campaign manager? And I made the mistake of saying yes first before I thought about it, because I had no idea what I was in for. But it's small Kootenai County, right? And, well, you would think there was a bunker underneath the sheriff's office, some federal government facility or something like that, because that was one of the toughest races I've ever seen. And coming from the Washington, D.C. area, I think I have a little bit of credibility to talk about something like that. And so, eventually, as you know, Bob won. He won with 45% of the vote in a 4-way race, which is pretty significant in the Republican primary. And once he became sheriff, I thought my job was over, until he started sharing with me some of the things that were going on in county government. And I have to tell you, I was a little surprised, because I've lived in very liberal communities where defunding the police is just, that's the new normal there, and crime goes out of control. But there's not much difference between defunding and underfunding. And what I recognize is that we were having a crisis inside our sheriff's office, and it doesn't do us any good to have a strong sheriff who's going to protect our rights if he doesn't have anyone in his organization who's willing to do that. And so when you started sharing with me some of these problems, I recognized that something needed to be done. Then right after, the two commissioners who got reelected 2 years ago, my opponent and Commissioner Brooks, they decided that they wanted to change our form of government. And their preference was making the sheriff's position, among others, all the other electeds, higher. Well, over my dead body.
Yeah, good.
Over my dead body. So I got involved with the optional forms of government, thanks to Commissioner Duncan. She appointed me or nominated me as an alternate. And at first, I actually really wanted to be on the commission as an active member, but it turned out that it was much better for me to be an alternate because I was considered a member of the general public and therefore would not be bound by the same rules as the commission itself. So those were the two big issues that kind of led me to decide to run for office, because I learned that we have some problems inside county government, and one of them is that we have people who, in my opinion, are more like micro-tyrants and less like servants to the community. And I'll give you an example of my organization. I look at, most people are familiar with an organizational chart that's like a triangle with the top is where the point is, and that's usually where the CEO is or something like that. I look at my organization like this, an upside down triangle, where I'm on the bottom and the customers are on the top. And I think it should be the same way in government. That the Board of County Commissioners' job is to support those people that support you in the community, that serve you. And that's their job. I don't see it as one of having control over other elected officials, being able to tell them what to do, how to do their job. That's ridiculous. And so that's part of the reason that I think there needs to be fresh ideas. Now, it was interesting because we were talking about the sheriff's office with the treasurer. And to me, the last place to look to get money is your property taxes. That should be the last place that we should get money. And I'll tell you, again, these are the things that I learned. Our 911 dispatch service, it's a county paid for function. The county taxpayer pays for that. But we provide services to Coeur d'Alene. Why aren't they paying us?
That's right.
They should be paying us.
Right.
We provide that to a number of other districts. They don't pay for it. Post Falls has their own dispatch service. Once you incorporate as a city, guess who the chief law enforcement officer is for that city? The mayor. That's why cities often have their own police departments or contract with the sheriff's office. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's not $500,000 or more just sitting on the table there with some of these other jurisdictions that are not paying for their 911 dispatch services. Same thing with our Hayden contract. They're probably getting about $1.7 million worth of law enforcement, and I think the contract went up to 430,000, something like that, 420. Before that, it was 330,000. Again, you, the county citizen, if you're not living in Hayden, you're subsidizing it. If you're living in Hayden, well, you're getting a sweet deal right now. So, those are areas where we can look to increase the revenues, to help offset some of these deficiencies in staffing. To me, the most important component of an organization is your human capital. You have to retain your human capital. You cannot be in a situation where you're always trying to recruit and hire and have folks that just don't have the experience. It's very important to maintain that, especially in a larger organization, because as people go through the organization and eventually retire, you need to have qualified people to fill those positions. And if you don't have those qualified people, I can assure you, you'll start to see things unravel. We're already seeing that in our country right now with our logistics. Fortunately, we're able to keep the shelves pretty well stocked, but you may recall a few months ago where there were shelves that were kind of empty on some things. And that is the unraveling of our logistics. And so it's really important that we do everything we can to protect our human capital. How much more time do I have? I have 1 minute, so I'm going to wrap this up. First of all, I do want to thank you for changing party affiliation to help support me for this coming. Oh wait. My opponent 2 years ago, after he won the Republican primary, is on video thanking the Democrats for changing party affiliation to help him win the Republican primary. And so one of the things that's important to me is because, like in a corporation where I have customers who give me their money, you're going to give me your vote. And I equate that as the same as your money. And there's nothing worse than buying something that you think is A and you get B. And so that's one of the things I promise, is that what you see is what you get. You know, I'm a strong Second Amendment supporter, both the Coeur d'Alene Trap and Skeet and Fernand Ride and Gun Club endorsement. Obviously, I'm a strong supporter of public safety because I know what it's like. I lived in Baltimore City. In fact, when I started my business, I process served. So I went through every nook and cranny of that city, and I can tell you, it's scary.
Very scary.
And you want to have a good, solid public safety program in your community. One where the culture is that people within law enforcement know that their job is to help protect your rights, not to figure out how to trick you out of your rights. Because I've seen that back east. And then, of course, to be an advocate for you. And nothing bothers me more in these public hearings and comments where 95% of the people say, we don't want you to do this, only for them to drop the gavel and say, well, we heard you, but it doesn't matter, we're going to do it anyhow. So, with that, May 17th is where all the action is, and I ask for your vote. My name is Bruce Mattare. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Questions?
Hi Bruce, thank you for coming tonight. And here I'm for a private sector businessman coming into public service to be a creative problem solver. So having said that, I like the idea of not just automatically going to the well and raising our property taxes to support our sheriff, which we need to support, but to go to the other jurisdictions that are enjoying a cut rate service from our sheriff. How do you propose in amending the contracts, like with City of Hayden, CDA, etc.?
Well, first of all, the Hayden contract, I think right now is getting renewed every year because they know that they're not paying their fair share. So we need to come up with a plan for them to get to where they need to be in 5 years or 7 years. But it's got to be something that the county can bank on. Same thing with 911 dispatch. You can't just show up at people's door and say, you owe us $300,000, you haven't been paying us. So you have to kind of, get them to be able to work that into their budgets. Now, I think that fees are a really good place to look. The county, about half the budget comes from property taxes and the other half comes from fees. If I could, and I would call every state legislator that I could and try to change the law. And if you're an out-of-state resident and you spend one night in Hotel Kootenai County, the jail, we should be charging you for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I am all for charging people who don't live here the fees necessary that keep this place going, because the folks who live here should not be footing the bill. This is a resort town, and I respect that, but it also attracts another element, especially in the summertime. I think roughly 30 to 50% of the people in the jail are from Spokane. I'd love to find a way to charge those folks. Some of these things. And I think that as a commissioner, I would be a steward for you. I represent you. And so I should be a avenue to provide good information to you so you know what's going on. And then make the case. Here's where we are. Here's where we need to be. Here's the way that I propose we do that over the next 2 years. And we may need to talk at some point about your help, which would be the property taxes. But at least you know where the money's going. At least you know what's happening. So.
Good.
Thank you.
Hi, we live county between Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls. So, you know, it's a rural suburban area where we have wells and septic tanks. And even though we're only 6 minutes from downtown Coeur d'Alene, we don't have broadband, we don't have consistent internet. But, you know, our biggest concern is growth in the county, okay? The cities of Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene have infrastructure. They have city water, they have sewer, they have sewage treatment plants. We're seeing, you know, tracts of land, some of them over or very close to the aquifer, you know, coming up for like subdivision and, you know, for high density, you know, like half-acre lots, you know, and we don't have sewers, we don't have, you know, water systems. And so, you know, I want to know what your take is on that and what you can do, you know, to stop this high density growth. I mean, we have a water rights issue, you know, like, and, you know, like, and also I'm really concerned about, you know, the infrastructure costs and cap fees issues. So where do you stand on all that?
Well, the short answer is that, to me, less density is better for this community. That's what attracted us here. It's a double-edged sword. You know, many of us lived in the city. We didn't want to continue living in the city. We wanted to live in where there were more open spaces. So all of my policies would be geared towards maintaining those open spaces. Now, the challenge is, and again, when you increase your density, that's where most of the problems come from, whether it's your water table, whether it's the waterways, whether it's traffic, whether it's just your overall quality of life. Now, what's interesting about this area is that it's actually very confusing. Where do you go? Well, if you live in the city, it's the city's issue, right? So if you lived in Coeur d'Alene, and you probably could end up being gobbled up by one of these cities, and you know, look at their comprehensive plan, 2042, right? They all want more, Coeur d'Alene wants more density, but they did not include traffic studies in that comprehensive plan. To me, that is negligence beyond belief.
Yeah, right.
How can they do that?
Yeah.
You know, so there are limitations with what the county can do. However, with that said, what I don't want to tell you is it can't be done, I'm bound by law, or any of those other types of things, or that's a city issue. Because this community, I haven't met anyone yet who says, you know, I can't wait for that next 35-story building to get built. I can't wait for more stoplights. I can't wait for more density. No one has said that. And so as a community, we have a right to define the future of where we live. Because you see, the community is defined by you, the people. Not by the mountains, not by the lake, it's you. You live here, you make up this community. And so when someone tells you, well, what about the million people who want to move here? I don't care. I care about the people who are here. Okay? Now, the downside to that is that get ready for your property values to skyrocket even more. Because that's what we're seeing. And so you have to understand that there's going to be a downside. And the downside is that some people aren't going to be able to afford homes. But I can tell you, I lived in those communities where they had a lot of apartments. First generation is fine. Second generation is, you know, it starts to go down. By the fifth or sixth generation of leasee, you know, you get lots of calls for service with law enforcement. Healthcare is delivered through the emergency room and the ambulance, and they become a blight on the community. So, I hope that kind of answered it. I'd also just want to be an advocate and provide the information, because a lot of people don't even know where to go when it comes to addressing some of these issues.
One thing, I'm going to mention a bad word here, Chris Filios. I had asked him this question about what can we do about this road, and he said, you know, we can't stop somebody from developing their property, there's property rights, but we can stop them from subdividing. They don't have a right to subdivide their property. And so that's something I hope you'll look at when it comes to more rural areas of the county that are close to Coeur d'Alene,
You're right.
close to Post Falls that are
You're right. So, real quick here, you know, the comprehensive plans, they're very long term, right? So we could have had a comprehensive plan in Coeur d'Alene that had less density, that didn't advocate for that. So that's the first place to start. There's the long-term approach and there's the short-term. Now, the other side, of course, is impact studies. Okay? We don't do legitimate impact studies in this community. You know, someone in Hayden told me that they just send out a blast email to all the other taxing districts and say, hey, we're looking at this 200 unit development. What do you think? How's it going to affect the fire department? Right? And half of them will reply back. You know, there's
That's
not a
considered a
legitimate
good
study.
study.
And so, you know, you may have your property and your rights, but it doesn't mean that you can build a 500 unit development without it affecting other infrastructure and services. And that has to be addressed. You know, it's our community, and it may take a long time to fix this, but it's our community, and so we just have to figure out how to do that.
Next question.
Thank you for running. So that brought to mind the property in this area that the whole world wants to be in. And as a commissioner, maybe I could give Leslie, since she has been one, I'm not sure if this is in your wheelhouse, and I don't understand commissioners and counties, but if BlackRock has already bought up most of all this, and we've accepted money from the federal government, is there something the county commissioners can do about that from this day forward?
I'm not familiar with. You know,
That's a pretty big deal. If you will look into that.
Yeah. Most of what's happening today has been approved 8 to 10 years ago. So whatever gets done today probably won't be, you won't see the effects of that until another 8 to 10 years. Now, the good news is that the market is actually kind of correcting itself, because not only did the raw materials go up 3, 4, 5-fold in some cases, but so is labor expenses. So, and with interest rates going up, we're going to start to see a slowdown.
Yep.
But as far as any kind of federal government, BlackRock, I'm not familiar with anything like that. Obviously, the federal government has strings attached on some of the money that they provide. But you know, my concern isn't so much what the strings are; it's what happens if you don't follow. And if there's no consequence for not following, then you know that's more important to me. Especially on projects that you would have had to pay for anyhow through